Good morning, everybody. Wisconsin's 10th District Senator Rob Stafsholt is our very special guest today, Thursday, April 13th, 2023. A quick programming note. Next week, it looks like we'll be doing 4 live shows. It's supposed to be done in quite a while. Starting with Positive Tuesday, the Ben and Fitzy show on Tuesday, which, of course, we had to cancel that this week due to, obviously, the horrific tragedy down in Barron County, but it looks like we're probably going to be back on for next Tuesday. We'll have more on that on Sunday or Monday. And then on Wednesday, Kirk Anderson of The Kirk Anderson Show will be chatting with a guest right here on DrydenWire. Then on Thursday, it's 420 Day. So, of course, we'll be once again chatting all things marijuana with Ignite Dispensary founder and owner Timothy Fry. And then finally on Friday, we wrap up the week when I'll be chatting with Sawyer County Judge John Yackel. All of our live shows start at 8:30 in the morning and stream on our Facebook page. But if you miss any of them, a recording of those will be posted on our YouTube channel and on our website later in the day following the conclusion of each show. But today, filling in for Congressman Tom Tiffany, who wasn't able to join us for his monthly chat this month, is the senator from Wisconsin's 10th District, our friend and friend of the show, Rob Stafsholt. Rob, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Ben. Thanks. Least I could do is fill in for our congressman when he's not able to be here, right?
Oh, what a guy. See? You're something.
Bill him accordingly.
Yeah. Where are you? Well, you're in a suit. Where are you right now?
Well, I'm certainly not home on the farm, am I? I'm actually in the state capitol this morning. I hope there's not too much echo because we're in this big, beautiful building, but it's not always the best for acoustics. But I have a committee hearing in a little bit. I need to go testify in, and then we got a busy day today. We have an offsite caucus and a few other hearings and stuff going on. So
whatever. That's just that's just a green screen and a picture of your office. You're just sitting in your living room right now.
Yeah. No, I'd spin you around and show you all the big buildings, but I'm afraid I'd screw it up. So.
And Chief Wilson is watching, saying good morning. Good morning. Oh, shoot. That's right. We have a little bell for him. Where'd they go?
Do we?
Dave Wilson.
Is that the Herbster bell?
Yep.
Cornucopia. I think it's Cornucopia Bell is where Dave
Hey, if you're in your office, and this is the first time, I think, this is the first time we've had a chat with you when you're in your office. Is that Patty Schochner's old office? And did she carve in "F you, Stafsholt"? Because that's totally something that Patty would do. She's kind of a rebel.
She did not. This is actually a different office than she was in. And actually, I was with her earlier in the week this week. So
really? For what?
Yeah. She's the St. Croix County medical examiner, and she, give credit where credit's due, she did a great job of finding a machine that does some preliminary autopsy stuff, so St. Croix County doesn't have to send all their bodies over to Ramsey County in Minnesota, and she's saving the taxpayers some money, and I think we're trying to expand that, and she just wanted to give me a tour to make sure I was aware of it.
But she's a Democrat, right?
Yeah.
She's saving the taxpayers money.
I've heard that. I've heard that.
Oh, that's great. All right. So that's fine. Hopefully Adam Jarko is watching, so then he can look at that office and say, man, that could have been me.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for, Patty. So I wanted to share some with you. So I have nothing written down for topics. I really like it, that, just about whatever. But I want to share something with you first. You were on in November of last year, and we were talking about wolves, right? And it was about, I think the DNR had a survey or something about that and wolf stuff. And man, I got to tell you, I received so much emotion mail, and I call it emotion mail because it's softer than saying, hate mail, following that show over 48 hours. And it was just surreal. In my brain, because I'm thinking, okay, if we had a whole show on abortion or guns or LGBTQIA+, I get it. People have strong feelings about that stuff, and they're going to want to, vent those or share those with us for some reason. But it was about wolves. So we're totally talking about wolves again.
Okay. I'll see if I can muster up some answers. Yeah, wolves is one of those things that in politics, there's some lightning bolt issues that are just, there's not a lot of middle ground. People are very passionate, and I respect that from both sides. So both sides are equally as passionate.
Yeah, so is there anything, what did ever end up happening with that? There was that survey that went out. Where are we on that? Is it finished? Is it still ongoing? And if it is finished, what does that mean?
I'm not exactly sure where the DNR is with their survey, but they came out with a wolf management plan, which it was time to update our wolf management plan, and so people were pretty excited about that. And then it came out, and I think it fell flat in a lot of people's eyes, and I think it was great in a lot of people's eyes, depending on which side of the emails you received. Those folks are on, but my biggest concern with that, honestly, is we've been managing wolves in the state of Wisconsin, and because it's such a heightened subject for a lot of people, we've been managing wolves for a long time and being really specific with what we do. And one of the things we've always done is had a population goal, basically saying this is what the state's population goal should be. And way back, I think when they first started, I believe it was 100. And scientifically, we looked at that and said, no, that's not enough. If a disease came in, it could wipe out the population. So they bumped it up to 350, which is where it had been for a long, long time. And now this wolf management plan came out with no population goal. And of course, some people believe in that system and that method, saying, well, it should be, it shouldn't be a number as much as how many are in the landscape and where things are. I believe that we should have a population goal. In fact, myself and Representative Chance Green have come up with a bill to require a population goal in the wolf management plan in the state of Wisconsin. So I just think, the other side, who is what I would call pro-wolf, if there's no population goal, there's no trigger to have a harvest season or to reduce the population. Oh, sure. And I know people are super jumpy when you start talking about a harvest season, but in reality, if there's no population goal, there's no trigger to adjust the population up or down. So I think that's important that we have that. I also think with the swinging of the pendulum back and forth, whether they're on the endangered species list or they're not, one of the things that's required to delist an animal is that you have a management plan in place and that there are parameters to ensure the safety and the longevity of the population of that species in your state. I think a population goal goes towards that, and I think if we remove it, folks on the federal level might say, well, now we're not real sure about, what is the plan. And by no means is it that there's not a plan. I just think it's one more thing that they can look at and say, well, now you're making adjustments. What's the plan here? So at the end of the day, my goal would be to delist wolves from the endangered species list and let Wisconsin manage Wisconsin's wolves.
And what is the pushback there? What's the argument for the other side?
So the argument from the other side is that Wisconsin will reduce the population to too low a number that will endanger the wolf. And I think a lot of folks from across the United States who maybe don't live in Wisconsin or haven't actually lived where wolves are, and there's plenty of folks that are pro-wolf that live in Wisconsin. I'm not saying that, but it always interests me when we're having these kind of discussions and someone from Florida is weighing in heavily on how we manage our wolves.
I think some of those people sent me those emotion mails, by the way, from the last show, from Florida.
Yeah, I get some of those too. But like I say, there's those people that share those same ideals and perceptions on wolves in Wisconsin with those people. So I take their opinions with value, but somebody from California, New York, or Florida weighing in on how we manage wolves in Hayward holds a little less value to me than somebody that actually lives in Hayward.
So just last week, we had a Supreme Court election, and I don't want to get into too much about that because I think there's like rules or something, campaign stuff. And I think somebody asked us when I put up the announcement yesterday that you were going to be on, asked about, are you going to be running for Senate or something? But I think there's like rules. If you're like a government office, you can't actually talk about campaign stuff, something like that. Yeah. But I will ask you this. With it now being, I think it's referred to now as a liberal court or a liberal Supreme Court, how much impact does that now have? What does that change for legislators in Wisconsin, and maybe more specifically Republicans?
Yeah, so to go back to what you said about campaigns, we always make sure that anything that's financed by taxpayer dollars, and I'm in my official office today, that we don't talk about anything campaign related, especially for myself. But talking about election results, I think, is fair game, and how that shapes the way we do things here in Wisconsin. So that Supreme Court race was a huge deal. It was nationally watched. I think if you define that now as a liberal court from a Republican standpoint or a conservative standpoint, I think your concern is the things that we've worked for the last 10 or 12 years that have been successful from a conservative standpoint. I think those things will now get challenged in court, and they'll move up the pole and end up in the state Supreme Court. And of course, it gives it a little different light if it's a quote unquote liberal court versus a conservative court. I think for us, the risk there is that some of the things we've done that we would consider to be positive from a conservative standpoint will now be overturned, and the interpretation of the law would be something counter to what we believe.
Yeah. And Larry, you're right. Yeah, we have some feedback issues. So this is the first time he's been doing it at the down there. So for anyone, here's a little behind the curtains thing when it comes to audio. When I talk, it's coming out his speaker, but then his microphone is picking it up, so it's sending it back. So it is what it is. Now we're aware of it, so we'll get that corrected for next time. But there's nothing, unfortunately, we can do about it right now.
I would say that we should blame Tom Tiffany for canceling. I mean, had we had more time, we certainly could have provided a better show for the folks, but
Yeah.
it is what it is.
It is what it is. So just to be clear, there wasn't the election is over Tuesday night because it was. I mean, it was over like within an hour. It was already called.
Yeah.
And like Fitzy and I, when we do our election predictions, should it go wrong? And again, this isn't who we want to win. It's just outside looking in and who's going to win. We both had Janet winning, and then we had the over-under of 3 points. He picked the over, I picked the under. Wow, we were way off, right? It was like 10 and a half points. But was it the next day or, at 11 o'clock that night, you guys are doing something, or maybe when you're in your caucus going, okay, now that Janet's in, it's all hands on deck. Here are the things we have to start doing now. Or there's nothing we're really going to do right now because there's nothing that we can do. We're just going to keep doing our regular job and see how this plays out. Or is there something that you guys are doing because of the election result?
No, I think it's different. We have a caucus today, which is the first one since the election for the Republican Senate. We have a caucus today, and I'm sure that will come up and discuss what, if anything, we would change in our approach or the way we're doing things. But I don't necessarily foresee a big change in what we're doing. I think the outlook, it's different when Governor Evers is a Democrat and he runs the governor's office. He's in the governor's office, obviously. And so I think that strategically, how you pass bills, what you can and can't get done, I think that has a bigger impact on our day-to-day operations. But I think the Supreme Court race will have a bigger impact on the overall feel and policy and direction of the state of Wisconsin. But I think from a legislator standpoint, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. And that process goes through the court. It's a separate branch of government, and they kind of determine interpretations of the laws we write. So a lot of it's kind of hindsight's 2020. Let's see what they interpret on laws that we wrote 10 years ago or 15 years ago or whatever it might be.
Sure. So what I'm going to do, so I literally just now muted you. So if you see that on your screen, sorry about that. It's not like I didn't like what you were saying. But that will prevent any of the feedback. Just remind me if for some reason you start talking and we can't hear you, I have to unmute you. But for right now, that's just our quick fix for the audio issue. So speaking of that, the Supreme Court, a liberal court majority, again, however people want to define that, is that a bigger issue, or is it Republicans have the majority in the Assembly and in the Senate, but there is a governor, a Democratic governor, who has said he's going to veto a lot of things. Are you really able to get anything done? Is it more impactful to you from a conservative, a Republican going, we want to get these things done? Supreme Court actually isn't our biggest issue right now, and maybe issue is the wrong word. Our challenge right now, our challenge is we have to get this. We have to put something to Governor Evers that he's not going to veto, and that must be a very fine a fine balance there. How do you get what you want to get done, knowing that we have to do it in a certain way to make sure that it's actually not going to get vetoed?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think the Supreme Court is something that we don't change what we do, day to day, but the consequences of that election are something that we don't really have any control over. So to fret over that as a legislator when you're writing bills and writing laws, to say that we wouldn't consider it or what that might look like in the eyes of the court, we probably consider that, but we'd probably consider it anyway, regardless of that election. So that's kind of a secondary, that happens afterwards. So we don't consider that, but you're absolutely right. Working with the governor's office to get bills passed, working with our colleagues on the Democrat side, both in the Senate and the Assembly, you have to look at, is this a policy, whatever your bill might be, is this something that I want to for sure get passed, even if I have to give up 20 or 30 or 40% of what I think should be in this bill? And if I give up that much, what's the likelihood that it would pass on the governor's desk and with my colleagues? Or is this something that is true to our beliefs and our policies as conservatives? So there, we're going to send it out the way it is. And if he vetoes it, then that's going to be our message is we tried to do this, but the governor vetoed it. And we do things both ways. And full honestly, there's things that we put out that we are almost certain that he's going to veto. And we do that to show people that we tried to do this, he vetoed it, and it just depends on what you believe, and he's vetoing those because the people that elected him believe in the things he's doing. So, to answer your question, we've got a couple of things going on right now, and some smaller bills, and bringing in some Democrat colleagues and just say, hey, what do you think of this? And sitting around a table and saying, well, I'm not really on board with this, but I'm good with this part of it, or and then you have to decide is the part they're not good with, is that something you can live without, and if that gets them on the bill as a co-sponsor or someone to testify in a hearing, pretty soon if you get some Democrat colleagues of mine signed on to a bill, it gets to the governor's office and it's seen in a different light than if it's only Republican names on the bill.
Is there? Can you share what some of those things are? Are there current? What are some of the bills that you're working on right now?
Yeah, the biggest one obviously is the budget. So we're the budget. The Wisconsin state budget is basically about 300 legislative bills all packed into one huge one. So it's super complicated. Uh, and people will say, well, you voted against uh, funding XYZ. And the answer is yes, but it was part of the budget. So again, sometimes you're trying to get 80% you want and you have to give up some things you don't. But the budget's the biggest thing that's going on right now. It will probably be the most controversial. I don't know where we stand with the governor's office, and it kind of depends on where that he put out his proposal, and we're kind of rewriting that, and hopefully we get to something that everybody can vote for and sign into law from the governor's office. But yeah, it's an interesting process some days.
So the other thing that was on the election or on the ballot or during the election was cash bail. And essentially, this just would allow judges to have more tools in the toolbox to look at a lot more factors when it comes to assigning cash bail. They can now look at their past history, because I think before it was just simply your likelihood to come back for your next appearance, your initial appearance. And now it's, well, we can look at other factors, severity of the crime stuff. We can look at your past history, the risk or maybe safety for the community. Were you surprised that it passed, both of them, because there was two, but I'll put an average here. It was about 65% was yes. Were you surprised that it was as much as 65%? Or were you surprised that it wasn't higher?
I will just say that I think those two questions, though it's hard to write out in legal language, those two questions were a little confusing. I got more text messages and Facebook messages and phone calls from people I know that said, what is this question asking me? Or this is on there. What does it mean? And I think the folks that wrote that, it was confusing to a lot of people. But I don't know how you could have written it better because of the legalities it required. But to answer your question, there was two questions on there. Both of them basically had to do with the same thing. One had to do with the dollar amount, and one had to do with whether or not we actually allow them to leave the facility and get out of jail. So the question was, and we found out, and I was a little surprised actually, that Wisconsin is one of the few states that only considers for cash bail and the dollar amount. The only thing that the judge is legally allowed to look at currently is whether or not what he sets, if he lets them out, the probability that they will get back to the next court appearance, and if the dollar amount is high enough that it would be a big enough hit that they didn't, that would deter them from not skipping the next court appearance. It's only about whether or not they show up to the next court appearance. And I think with a lot of the public safety things that we've seen across Wisconsin and honestly, across the United States in the last few years, there's been some cases where, the judge looked at that, and that's the only parameters he's allowed to look at. And I think a lot of people were saying, why are we letting some of these people out on bail? They have a long record of doing horrible, horrible things. And so now those two questions allow that judge to consider previous history, violence in the crime that they allegedly committed now. There's a lot of different parameters they can add into there that that a lot of folks think maybe make for a better decision. And I don't disagree with that. The only thing is someone like myself that comes at the world from a little bit of a libertarian side is I'm always careful to make sure we're not convicting people before they have their day in court. So, um, some of those kind of questions are a little bit tricky because the emotional tug on the heartstrings, yeah, this is common sense. Why wouldn't we do this? Well, proven until innocent until proven guilty is something that we need to hang on to in this country, and it's always something that in the back of my mind.
So was that something that you supported and you liked to see that done? Because there is, you kind of just touched on that. It all looks good. It all sounds good. It all feels good, which that's kind of weird for almost like conservatives and Republicans, because Democrats right now, let's face it, they've got all the feel good stuff. Republicans don't. So is that maybe that's one of those, hey, we kind of have something here, and I don't know if that was really necessarily like a Republican thing. But is that something that you look at and think this was a great idea? Because there is a risk that a judge, and let's face it, sometimes judges, it's weird how they're really passionate about like one thing and not something else, and they're known for this. There could be a potential there where that is going to get abused. Do you have any concerns about that? That it will work as long as the judges don't abuse this. Any concerns?
So I had big concerns when I first looked at it because of my libertarian streak and wanting to make sure that people aren't convicted before their day in court. But as I looked at it more, we were representatives of the people, and the people overwhelmingly wanted something more. They wanted to address this issue where people are getting out on bail and committing more crimes and doing violent things, and they're walking around free while they're going to court. The general public, and it's proven by the results of those questions, but the overwhelming majority of the public wanted that. And the way that I made sure that it was okay with my libertarian side was those judges are elected. And so if that judge is doing things that we don't agree with or that the public doesn't agree with, they have election day. That's their checks and balances, and we can vote them out and vote somebody else in that we think will do a better job of setting those bails and not abusing that privilege.
All right. What else is going on down there that, I don't know, what do you want to talk about? What else is happening?
Well, there's a lot of things going on, and I think, unfortunately, some stuff gets drowned out just because we are in the budget process, and that's a huge undertaking. But I wasn't up for election last year, and so I continued to run a committee. Actually, was asked to be the chairman of a committee on licensing reform in the state of Wisconsin. We have an agency called DSPS, which is in charge of about 240 professional licenses. And over the last year and a half, 2 years, it's been more and more constituents have called my office and just can't seem to get their licenses processed. And these are folks who went to a 4-year education, passed all the tests, got the degree, did all the paperwork, they have it, and they send it in the state just to get the license. And they have a job, people are waiting to employ them, and they just don't ever get the license. And we heard atrocious stories of how long it took. And so the majority leader in the Senate asked me if I'd been having a lot of those problems and whether or not we'd had much success dealing with them, which we had. So he asked me to chair that committee, and it was a bipartisan committee. We had public members from different area groups on the committee, and I'm really proud of it. We had a really good committee, and we didn't agree on everything. I think at the end we had 4 or 5 hearings, and we had all kinds of bill ideas. 13 of those, I think, got drafted into bills, and then because if we didn't have by far the majority or almost a unanimous vote in my committee, I didn't let them pass. I thought those bills can stand on themselves. So I think we came forward with 9, and I think about 7 are actually going to get introduced that are trying to address that. And people are like, well, what does that mean? For instance, where I live in New Richmond, a lot of times we have rural healthcare issues where there's not access to a lot of things, or if it is, you have to travel to the cities. Well, those people in the cities are willing to come out to Wisconsin every other Thursday to our local hospitals and work out there or whatever it might be, or dental offices, but we can't get a reciprocity license agreement signed, and they're already doing the job. So it's just been cumbersome, and we're trying to do some different things to help ease that up, and those bills are hopefully making a track. We had one lady, honestly, that had been a drug and alcohol abuse counselor in Minnesota, had given up her residence there and quit her job and moved to Ashland, Wisconsin, where her services were much needed, both in the the city there, as well as a couple of local tribes that all requested that that position was there. She went there and she couldn't get her license. At the last hearing, she had been waiting for 14 months. I talked to her, a gal that she was supposed to work for. I talked to them maybe 3 weeks ago, and she finally gave up. It was 17 months she hadn't received her license. And she moved back to Minnesota to go to work. So those are the kind of things that we're trying to fix. And I'm excited about some of these bills. They're coming forward, and they're just coming out now. You'll see them in the next few weeks, but I really think we're going to make some progress there.
Well, I have to. All right, so 14 months, 17 months, I think is where that ended with her story. Still didn't get it. So when somebody applies for something, where does it go? Because I feel like that's probably the issue. I mean, what is causing this? I'm sure it's not just someone going, I don't feel like doing it today. It is whomever this department is that actually oversees this, and are they just wildly understaffed? Like they're just signing everything as fast as they possibly can? Or is it a long process? Like, what's the fix?
It's Ben. This particular instance was the combination that created the perfect storm. We had an agency that was perhaps understaffed, and we were looking at adding more positions. They had requested more positions, but they asked for 52 positions. And in our committee hearing, we asked, okay, well, what are those people going to do? They didn't have an answer. I said, well, okay, if we're going to process applications, what's your average number of applications current staff can process? We don't have that answer. Okay, well, why 52? Why not 47? Why not 87? Why 52? We didn't have an answer. There was just no parameters, and it became pretty evident that we needed a little bit more data coming out of that department to try to figure out how to help them. So that's one of the things that we're adding on. And I guess COVID hit too, so a lot of those folks were working remotely from home, and due to some policies as well as some HEPA stuff, they weren't able to take a lot of their files home, so that caused a huge backlog. And I think instead of saying we're trying to get caught up, it just kept getting worse, because then they had somebody that would go to the office once a week and send out as many files as they could to the people, and however many they got through in a day, that's how many. And then next week there was more files there than what they got out the previous week, and it snowballed and snowballed, and ended up with this impossible situation that they just couldn't get out of. So we worked with DSPS to some extent. Was a little disappointed during the committee hearings on their lack of ability to engage and actually give us data and answers to some basic questions. But we got through that, and I think we'll have some bills coming forward here in a bipartisan manner that hopefully will make that better.
Do you like doing those? I mean, when we talk about politics, and by we I just mean community, coworkers, families, neighbors, we talk about the abortions, gun rights, and gun control, and we talk about the things that we see on news. But there's so much more that happens. There's so many other bills that are like the one you're just talking about. Or the plan, like we have a problem, and it's our job as a government to fix it. There's so many more of those than there are the other stuff. But the other stuff is what people like to talk about. Do you? I don't know if prefer is the right word, but I'm going to use it. Do you prefer doing things like this where it's under the radar, but it's so important? And I like doing these, especially these are the kinds of bills that it doesn't matter if you're a Republican, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, like at all. There is no hate, there is no, oh, you Republicans suck, oh, you Democrats, go fly a kite. Do you like working on these?
I actually do, and the reason I like working on them is not because I like working on these types of bills. Is my favorite thing about being a legislator is someone that calls with a problem, a constituent case that we actually have the ability to help them and make their life better, help them get a license, help them with a property issue, help them with whatever it might be. All politicians on both sides of the aisle take plenty of flack. And, when I'm back home in off-duty time, people ask me, why do you do that? And the answer is, for every one person I can help that actually needs the help, it wipes off 20 of the not so friendly emails that we get, or phone calls, or engagements. And so I really believe that if I can help people like that, that's what makes me do this job. And people that are trying to get licenses to better their family life, better their household income, to better their small business. We had business owners calling saying that I've got these jobs, I got the people hired, but my insurance company won't let me come to work. They have the piece of paper on the wall, and it's been 6 months, it's been 4 months, it's been 9 months. We had one gal that called. She had bought a dental office in my Senate district, and a couple of the current dentists were retiring, so she hired two new dentists. So she bought a dentist office that was big enough for three dentists, and two of them retired. And so she gets in there and she needs two more dentists to handle all the patients, and they couldn't get the license. So it took way too long, and she was running around trying to be three dentists at one time, and it was a bad situation. So helping those situations is why folks on both sides of the aisle do this job.
So in the 10th Senate District, so obviously each Senate district is also is made up of 3 assembly districts. So the 10th, that would be the 28th, 29th, and 30th, right? So that is, well, Gabe Magnifici, that'd be 28th. I think Clint Moses and Shannon Zimmerman, are those the other ones?
Yeah.
And how they doing?
Clint struggles because his predecessor was really good at the job, and when he left, Clint had big shoes to fill. And I always tell him that. I always tell him that I was the second best state representative they had there, and that John Murtha was a heck of a guy, and he left big shoes for me to fill. So Clint likes to say that that he's the second best after John Murtha, but we all know that he's best.
Oh,
Gay is a long time retired, I think 30 or 31 or maybe 32 years as a emergency RN. So she brings a great perspective to all of our discussions on healthcare, on patient care, community service type things. She brings a good perspective on that. She's got an abundance of knowledge that I just will never have. So on anything related to hospitals and healthcare kind of stuff, I always talk to Gay, and Shannon has taken on a great role. He's on the Joint Finance Committee, and we are actually in northwestern Wisconsin, not just his district or my Senate district, but as a whole, northwestern Wisconsin and that quarter is very lucky to have a rural legislator on the Joint Finance Committee. And for those folks that might not know, Joint Finance Committee is the committee that kind of mulls through and does the budget, comes up with the proposals, decides what goes in, what doesn't go in. So it's sometimes historically has been tough to get rural legislators on the Joint Finance Committee, and we're pretty blessed these days. We've got Mary Falskowski up in the Northeast, and then Shannon right there on the western side of the state on the Joint Finance Committee. So Shannon's a smart guy when it comes to the budgetary stuff and the investments in our state and what gives us a good rate of return on the tax dollars that we spend, and he does a great job there.
Tom Tiffany, now I think about it, that is when I first got to know Tom, or even who he was, because he was from, and well, still is, in northeast Wisconsin. So not a northwestern Wisconsin politician at the time, right? I think he was in the assembly at one point too. But anyway, and I get a call from him, and I don't even know how he got my number. This was, I don't know, 5 years ago maybe. And he had said, yeah, I heard things about DrydenWire, et cetera. And yeah, I was wondering, I'd like to do, so I'm on that committee. I believe that's what he was on. And he said, what would you think about me doing like a weekly 2-minute or 4 or 5 minute long video? We'll record it here and we'll send it to you. It'll be kind of just for DrydenWire viewers. And it's just matter of factly, because that's what I said. Well, I don't want there to be any spin here. Just where are we right now in the budget? What's going on? What's been accomplished? What are the challenges? What's next? And he said, yeah, I would love to do that. So we started doing, he and his staff, every week, an update on the budget stuff, and we would air that. And that's when I first got to know him, which now makes sense because he's totally like a numbers nerd, which it's great that he was doing that. But yeah, if I recall, there's 12 people on that? I think somewhere around there. And can you tell us, is it Republican, Democrat? Does it have to be 6 and 6, or like all Republicans are the ones that are on it?
I think you're right on 12, but honestly, I'm not on that committee, so I'm not exactly sure. Mm. You're respectively close. And it's made up of both parties, just like any other committee. We have, usually the majority party has a majority member sitting on the committee, and that's true of that one as well. It's, co-chaired, and it's a joint committee, which is not always the case. A joint means that the Assembly and the Senate serve together on one committee. Oftentimes we have a Senate committee on healthcare and we have an Assembly committee on healthcare, and they might be might be labeled something a little different, but the healthcare issues go to two different committees, one in the Assembly and one in the Senate. But on the Joint Finance Committee is co-chaired by Mark Moran on the Assembly side and Howard Markeline on the Senate side. So those are both Republicans, but the minority leaders on both sides are strong people as well, and they have people sitting on the committee as well. So it which helps, as you talked about earlier. Eventually, that's going to go to Governor Evers on the Democrats. So we need to try and negotiate somewhere to something he might actually sign.
Yeah, and obviously with Romaine now being, so you were both in the assembly. Were you in the assembly at the same time? Yeah, you were, right? Yeah, and then I'm sorry, I just realized I still had you on mute. You're just like, huh? Sorry about that. So you're both in the assembly. Now you're both obviously in the Senate. Is his office somewhere close to you? And I don't know. Do you guys? How does that work? Kind of behind the curtains, kind of a thing. Do you go to each other's offices? And I'm not talking just like, hey, what's going on, buddy? I mean, is this something where you actually go there, or is it like a typical office where you just send emails, even though they're only like 2 doors down?
No, in all honesty, the way you pick your office is it's a seniority thing, and when an office comes available, whoever's the highest on the seniority gets to decide: do I want to move to that office, or will I stay where I am? And if they stay where they am, then the next person gets the call. So I actually prefer to be on the ground floor. I think it works well for me. I've always been on the ground floor, and traditionally, the longer you've been here, the higher up in the building you go. But I'm pretty well grounded here on the ground floor. So Romaine is not right next to me. He's down, and I think he's up on one floor. But we try to keep him as far away as we can.
That's a good idea.
But he's no, Romaine's great, and I like to think of him as like a little brother or something that you want to bring in and you mentor and try to show him his way. But in all honesty, Romaine Quinn is a very, very intelligent person. And once he wraps his head around an issue and decides, what the right policy is for him and the people he represents, there's nobody better in this building at emulating where he is on that position and why it's important. So I got to give the little guy credit. He's pretty good, and we're glad to have him back. And I think Northern Wisconsin's glad to have him back. He's been doing an impressive job of traveling around because his district is quite humongous. Yeah. He goes, and I don't even want to label it, but basically it goes from Superior all the way over to, I think, Mercer, and then from Dave Wilson's stomping grounds up there in Kearney all the way down south of Rice Lake. So it's a massive district, and he's been doing a pretty good job. I'm impressed at how much he gets around to all different spots of that district when he's back home.
Well, and the fact that he's like 30 ticks me off. It just does, because I still don't see him as a that young, and how long he's been doing this when he was in the assembly, and it's pretty impressive. Oh shoot, I just had a question. Oh, doggone it. Oh, I lost my train of thought now. I was too busy talking about Romaine. Oh, I know. With that Supreme Court election, I should have asked that when we were talking about it. MAPS, of course, was something kind of like with the abortion thing regarding we need to relook at this, and if lawsuits are filed, they'll take a look at this. Do you happen to know? Well, first, if you can kind of tell us, from your understanding, is anything going to change, like in a month from now, kind of a thing, or this is probably going to be a long process? But when that happens, are you concerned about if maps get redone, and does that go to like what Governor Evers wanted originally? Does it just default back to, the what the maps were before? How does that work?
Yeah, that's something of concern. One of the things I will say about this Supreme Court race is it's pretty untraditional for someone like Janet to be very open and vocal about the fact that she's going to rule a certain way, and she was in this instance. That was one of the things that caused me the most concern in this election building up, was that she was already basically saying how she was going to rule before she saw cases or whatever. But that being said, I think that it's pretty likely that those maps come to the Supreme Court. That'll be a challenge, and it'll come to their court, and she's obviously going to rule to redraw those. I think that's likely the way the court will go at this point if the Conservatives don't have the court, which we don't. So I think, to answer your question, if I'm concerned about it, there's a lot of people in this building that lose a lot of sleep worrying about exactly where those lines might go or might not go or whatever. And I just don't. I think it'll be what it'll be. I don't really particularly have a lot of control over that situation at this point. We did what we could to win that election, so it wouldn't be an issue, but we didn't. So I think it's pretty likely that that process starts sooner than later. To answer your question about if it's going to change right away, I don't think that happens. But I think the challenge comes soon, and then it's a whole big, long, drawn out court thing and mediation and all the things that happen with that take forever that annoy people. But I think sometime in the next year you'll see something different with maps and the way districts are drawn up.
All right. Well, we covered a lot of stuff. Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that we talked about that we didn't get a chance to? You actually, at the very beginning, you said that the reason that you're in the office, well, you're doing your job. That's probably why you're in your office. But there was something coming up after this. What did you say? It was like a vote on something or a committee? Or what are you doing right after this?
Yeah, actually, I'm looking over at my testimony. I'm going to testify in a hearing that started 12 minutes ago. You're fine. They're doing confirmations first. I'm up number 4 or something, so we're fine. But I'm going to testify on some dam removal grants.
Language.
And there's
I see what you're saying.
Okay. Yeah, no N, just the DAM.
Look at Patty.
Yeah, there's Patty.
And Rob said something nice about you at the beginning of the show, Patty.
Always good to see Patty. But yeah, I'm going to testify in that committee. There's a dam on the Kinnickinnick River south of River Falls that got caught up in an unintentional language in a previous bill or previous session. So we're trying to fix that so that the grant program works. Got to those trout in the Kinnickinnick.
That sounds terrible. Like what? Like I don't know why anybody does your job. Like and Patty when she was in the Senate and Adam in the Assembly and you and I don't get it. I have no idea. Like even we've talked a lot. Like with Fitzy and I, we talk about cops. Cops and firefighters? Like who runs into a fire? Blows my mind. Like how are people wired that way? So that's like the top tier of the professions that why do you even do this? I'm starting to put teachers up in the second tier now because that's almost getting to the point where why would anybody actually want to go and do that anymore? But honestly, being a legislator, I don't get it. It's not that great a pay. I'm in putting things in perspective. It's not like it's a 6-figure job. It's $50,000 and whatever, which is still very very nice. But it's not something that you necessarily strive for in terms of most people want to keep moving up. You don't really. In terms of salary, I mean, Assembly and Senate, it's only a couple $1,000 difference. So it's not like you're a store manager, then a district manager, then a regional director of operations, and there's huge pay increases here. And every 2 years in the Assembly and every 4 years in the Senate, you could just be out of a job. And then you deal with all the hate and all the negative. Why would anybody do this job? Which is why I'm so grateful for people like Adam and you and Romaine and Patty that do this, because that's a dumb job.
The other day I was looking at Patty when we had our meeting, and she seems much happier than she used to be. Not sure why that is, but she does, and I think that comes to it, and all of us, and that's one of the reasons I think Patty brings a lot is because we all have respect for anybody that's put their name on the line and done the job. We know how difficult it can be sometimes, no matter what party you're with. So I do respect that, but the answer to your question is at some point you have to ask yourself, well, if it's not me, then who? And I didn't serve in the military. I haven't served on a lot of local stuff. I was on my township planning commission once upon a time, but I kind of see this as my way of serving and giving back. I'm not a career guy. I won't be here forever, but this is how I see as giving a contribution back to the state that I love so much.
Well, you're a good man. And lastly, I got to ask you, because you and I are both friends with, and speaking of Adam, how's Adam doing?
I think Adam is equally as happy as Patty, if not happier. Every time I see him, he's off on some cruise with his wife and kids, and he told me he bought a brand new snowmobile this year, and I believe he told me he put 5,000 miles on a snowmobile this year. Every time I call him, he was snowmobiling somewhere. Him and Barb seem to really enjoy going to do that. So I think he's great. I think he's back home running his businesses and being the Adam Jarko that we all know and love.
Awesome. Rob, thanks so much. You were back. You were on in November, so I don't know how long it's been. 5 months. We should do this a little more often. Excuse me, a little bit more often.
Yeah, absolutely. Always a great pleasure to be on. I appreciate it, Ben. Good to see you. I'm willing to be on anytime.
Oh, thank you so much. Special thank you to, the senator from Wisconsin's 10th District, our friend and friend of the show, Rob Stafsholt, for joining us for a live chat this morning. I'll see all of you on Tuesday. I believe we'll be doing the show on Tuesday when Barron County Sheriff Chris Fitzgerald and I will be back for our latest weekly Positive Tuesday Ben and Fitzy show, which will be the first of 4 shows that we do next week. We'll have more on that. We talked about the beginning of the show, more on that on our website on Monday. So until then, for DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden, saying thank you for watching and have a blessed day.